I never expected a tiny envelope to destroy an entire family. But that's exactly what happened the day I found the DNA test my husband's family tried to hide. And the strangest part of all was that the test wasn't even meant for me. When I married Daniel, I believed I had married into the kind of family people write Christmas cards about. The kind that gathers around a big dinner table, laughs too loudly, argues about politics for 10 minutes, and then pretends everything is fine again. Daniel himself was everything I thought a husband should be: steady, thoughtful, and patient in a way that balanced my tendency to worry about everything. We met during our final year of college. He studied finance, I was finishing nursing school, and our relationship grew slowly in the quiet way the best ones sometimes do. No dramatic fireworks. No chaos. Just a steady certainty that we belonged in each other's lives. 2 years after graduation, Daniel proposed. A year later, we were married in a small outdoor ceremony surrounded by family and friends. His parents, Patricia and Robert, seemed delighted to welcome me into their family. His younger sister Lily hugged me and said she'd always wanted a sister. For the first few years, everything really did feel perfect. Then our son Ethan was born. The day Ethan came into the world was the happiest day of my life. Daniel cried when he held him for the first time, and I remember thinking that I had never loved anyone the way I loved the two of them in that moment. Ethan had dark curly hair and wide hazel eyes that seemed to stare straight into the world like he was already trying to understand it. When Patricia first held him in the hospital room, she smiled politely. But there was something in her expression that I couldn't quite place. She studied his face longer than most people would study a newborn. Then she said something that, at the time, sounded harmless. He doesn't really look like Daniel." Everyone laughed awkwardly. I laughed too. Babies change so much in the first few months. It seemed like a strange comment, but not a cruel one. At least, that's what I told myself. But Patricia didn't stop there. Over the next few months, the comments kept coming in small, subtle ways that were just sharp enough to make me uncomfortable. She would stare at Ethan during family visits and say things like, "Those eyes are interesting," or "Daniel was much lighter as a baby." Once she even joked, "Maybe he takes after someone on your side." Every time she said something like that, Daniel would roll his eyes and change the subject. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that some grandmothers were just overly observant. But the comments slowly started to feel less like observations and more like accusations. 6 months after Ethan was born, Daniel's family hosted a large dinner to celebrate his father's retirement. The whole extended family was there. Aunts, cousins, grandparents, people I had only met once or twice before. Ethan quickly became the center of attention. Everyone wanted to hold him, take pictures with him, bounce him on their knees. But throughout the evening, I kept noticing Patricia watching him from across the room. Not smiling. Not laughing. Just watching. During dessert, Daniel's aunt leaned across the table and said casually, "You know, he really doesn't look like anyone in this family." The room went quiet. Daniel looked up immediately. "What's that supposed to mean?" His aunt shrugged like she hadn't just dropped a bomb in the middle of dinner. "Nothing. Just saying." But Patricia spoke next, and her voice was calm in a way that made my stomach drop. "Maybe we should do a DNA test." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. But the silence around the table told me I hadn't. My heart started pounding. "Excuse me?" Patricia folded her hands on the table as if she were discussing something perfectly reasonable. "It's nothing personal," she said. "But the resemblance just isn't there." Daniel pushed his chair back sharply. "Mom. Stop." But she continued anyway. "If there's nothing to hide, then a test shouldn't be a problem." It felt like someone had slapped me across the face in front of 20 people. I had never cheated on Daniel. Not once. Not even close. But suddenly I was sitting in a room full of people silently wondering if my child even belonged to my husband. Daniel grabbed my hand. "We're leaving." Neither of us said another word as we walked out. I cried the entire drive home. When we got inside, Daniel wrapped his arms around me and held me tightly. "I'm so sorry," he said. "They had no right to say that." I asked the question that had been burning in my mind since we left the house. "Do you believe them?" He didn't hesitate. "Of course not." Then he kissed my forehead and said the words I needed to hear. "I trust you." For a while, that was enough. 3 months later, we visited Daniel's parents again. Patricia had insisted she wanted to apologize, and Daniel believed it might help repair the tension between everyone. But the moment we arrived, something felt strange. Patricia was unusually cheerful. She brought gifts for Ethan and complimented me repeatedly in a way that felt rehearsed. While Daniel helped his father in the garage, I carried Ethan upstairs to change his diaper. As I passed Patricia's home office, I noticed a large envelope sitting on her desk, partially hidden under a stack of magazines. Daniel's name was printed on the front. I don't know what made me pick it up. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the lingering anger from that dinner months earlier. When I opened the envelope, my stomach dropped. Inside were several sheets of paper covered in charts and percentages. At the top of the first page was the logo of a genetic testing company. And right beneath it was a sentence that made my entire body go cold. Probability of paternity, 0%. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 0% meant Daniel wasn't Ethan's father. But that was impossible. I had never been with anyone else. Ever. Then I noticed something even worse. The test had been completed 2 months earlier. And no one had told us. I stormed downstairs holding the envelope so tightly the papers were crumpling in my hands. Daniel looked confused the moment he saw my face. "What happened?" I threw the documents onto the table. "What is this?" Patricia froze. Daniel picked up the papers and read them quickly. His face turned pale. "Mom, what did you do?" She sighed like she was tired of explaining something obvious. I had to know the truth. "You tested my son without telling me?" Daniel asked. She shrugged slightly. "Well, clearly I was right." That was the moment something inside me snapped. "I never cheated," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Patricia rolled her eyes. "The test says otherwise." Daniel stared at the results, confusion spreading across his face. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "How did you get Ethan's DNA?" Patricia answered without hesitation. "We took a swab when we babysat him." Daniel looked furious. "You went behind our backs?" She simply pointed at the paper again. "The result speaks for itself." Daniel looked at me again, and I could see doubt flickering in his eyes, not because he believed I cheated, but because science was staring him in the face. Finally he said quietly, "Let's do another test." I nodded immediately. 2 weeks later, the new results arrived. Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table together to open them. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the envelope. Daniel unfolded the paper and read the first line. Then he read it again. "What?" he whispered. I grabbed the document from him. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. Daniel was Ethan's father. Which meant the first test had to be wrong. Or fake. We drove straight to Daniel's parents' house that same afternoon. Patricia looked irritated when we showed her the new results. "That's impossible," she said. Daniel slammed the papers on the table. "Then explain this." For the first time, Patricia looked nervous. But before she could speak, Daniel's father cleared his throat. "There's something we should tell you," he said quietly. The room fell silent. He looked down at his hands for a moment before continuing. "There was another test," he said. Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" His father took a deep breath. "We tested you." Daniel blinked. "You tested me?" His father nodded slowly. "And according to that test..." He hesitated. "You're not my biological son." The room went completely still. Suddenly everything made sense. Patricia hadn't been obsessed with Ethan's DNA because she thought I cheated. She had been terrified that history was repeating itself. Daniel wasn't his father's son. And she had spent 30 years hiding that secret. Daniel looked shattered. "So this was never about Ethan," he said slowly. "This was about you." Patricia started crying. "I was trying to protect the family." But Daniel shook his head. "No. You were protecting your lie." After that day, Daniel didn't speak to his parents for months. Not because of the DNA test itself, but because of the betrayal behind it. They had secretly tested his child, accused his wife of cheating, and dragged our marriage through humiliation, all to keep their own secret buried. Eventually, Daniel reconciled with his father. But things with Patricia were never the same again. 6 months later, Daniel did something unexpected. He ordered another DNA test, this time to discover who his biological father really was. When the results came back, we learned he had 3 half-siblings he had never met, an aunt who had been searching for him for years, and a grandmother who cried when she first spoke to him on the phone. That tiny envelope that almost destroyed our marriage ended up revealing a truth that had been hidden for 3 decades. And sometimes the secrets people fight the hardest to bury are the ones that eventually expose everything.